We're here at Musikmesse 2016 on the Audient booth with Tom, who's going to show us the new ASP8024 Heritage Edition. So,
That's correct.
Tom, what's new about this desk?
Quite a bit, but also it still retains the classic 8024 feel, really. For anyone who's not too familiar with the console, it was designed in 1997 by Dave Dearden and Gareth Davies, who are both, legends in the industry, really. And it's a bit of I would say, an understated modern classic because it was designed nearly 20 years ago. People still buy it today.
Yeah.
You just assume it's a new console, but it's actually really almost coming up to sort of almost quasi-vintage kind of territory. So we decided with the 20th anniversary coming up next year that we'd get in early and do a sort of heritage edition that tied back to David's actual heritage, because not everyone knows the fact that he's been in the recording industry since in the late 60s in South Africa and came to England in 1970. And had a job in Advision Studios, which was quite a big advertising studio in London, but they did a lot of music too. And so we've taken aspects of the consoles that would have been there in the 70s that give you that kind of fat old tone, second, third harmonic distortion and some transformer colour. And we've brought that into the mix bus of the 8024 whilst giving it a new design, graphical interface kind of improvements and a slightly more mature look maybe. That we were talking about it yesterday. The irony is that the old one was designed to be very silver, very modern looking.
Yeah.
And it was almost ahead of its time 20 years ago when all the consoles looked quite old and quite vintage. And now everyone wants slightly more vintage look. And I tried to actually outdo the silver to make it more modern looking. I just couldn't beat that from a modern point of view. So we've just gone dark and gone very 1970s style. Yeah.
Well, it looks great. I mean, so can you tell us a bit more about the technology that's gone into it, the sort of vintage style technology that's in there?
Certainly, yeah. So I mean, the input sides of the desk, which the desk is fully modular, so you have 12 channel buckets with the same Audient mic pre, same EQ, we've got new sort of graphical layout, but as you move across the channels to the mix bus, that's where you get the tone shaping. So we've upgraded the summing amps from integrated circuit types to a John Hardy 990C discrete amplifier.
Okay.
So a nice little 1-inch block, like the traditional 70s style discrete amplifiers. Mm-hmm. I would class it as the muscle car of mix amps. And actually David knew Dean Jensen, who was the guy who designed this a long time ago, and he sort of gave it as a gift to the industry as the greatest discrete amplifier one of the greatest you could buy. Mm-hmm. So that's what we've put in the mix bus, which gives it a wider sweet spot, a more muscular sort of mix bus tone. From there, you can engage what we've called the retro iron stage, which sort of incorporates a Class AB discrete driver with lots of second and third harmonic distortion it's inspired from American desks and cards that David used to build consoles from at Advision Studios. But then we've hybrided that with a load of Carnhill transformers on the output, so you have a nice big chunky, sort of slightly thick, lower mid-range. And then to take it a bit further, we've added some switchable EQ, which I'm calling low bump and high lift.
Okay.
Which is designed to sort of put on about halfway through the mix and just give you the option to shape into the desk. So you can have a thicker console, an area, a slightly smilier face, or you can flatten it off. So it's got quite a few switchable personalities, but they're not complicated to dial in. They're just very, simple choices, which works best when you're mixing, I think.
Right. Well, that sounds like an interesting update to what is a modern classic, essentially.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think that part of the rationale was that these days people tend to track on a console where you've got the nice clean Audient mic amps and then maybe mix in the box because of recall time, etc.
Yeah, sure.
But this gives you a reason to come out onto the console just to use it as almost a summing box if that's the modern workflow.
Sure.
Even if you bring two tracks out, so you still have total recall in the box. And use the DLC module, which can control the DAWs for fader balances and transport.
And that's an 8 fader bank?
It's an 8 fader bank of UE that you can move around. But it's also 8 channels of VCA automation that you can patch into the console. So new for the show, we've got the Fader Link plugin, which is an updated 64-bit AAX audio unit and VST, which will be available shortly for all of our Fader Link DLC users.
And can you tell us a little bit about the Fader Link technology then as well? Yeah,
so it's a plugin that runs in your DAW, which generates MIDI data to and from, control data to and from the Ethernet connection on our DLC module.
Yep.
So it uses sort of like virtual MIDI busing. And it allows you to have fully stored automation of volume and cut for the 8 VCAs on the desk. So you have a soft mute as well, so it's a click-free automated mute. So you could use that on the console just to mute reverb returns in the gaps, in between songs. You could use two VCAs for a drum parallel, and you could ride that in the chorus or the backing vocals. The DLC is quite cool because you can patch it to the subgroups or any point on the desk because it has its own I/O. So one thing I like is that you could use it as an 8-channel summing box once you've been tracking. You have 8 channels of automation with pan, and then all that discrete mix bus technology and the bus compressor, which we've updated as well.
Right.
So you could kind of track, mix in the box, have 8 channels of summing with automated levels for some subgroups. If you factor in, buying little summing boxes, monitor controllers, some pre's, and a desk, a piece of furniture, it's actually a good deal when you start to look at the centerpiece of the studio.
And so, just quickly, what are the updates to the mix bus then?
For the compressor?
For the compressor, yeah.
So we've changed the makeup gain slightly to make it smoother. I always found the old metering, we used LEDs, which were in 2 decibel segments. And if you're used to mixing on that sort of VCA bus comp, you just tickle the needle a bit. You don't know you're doing that until you've probably gone over that point.
Right.
So we've gone to a nice illuminated, 1 milliamp DC style meter, which is very traditional. And then we've added a very smooth, sort of 350 hertz, shallow, sort of sidechain tilt, which I've called bass expand. And that just relaxes the whole low end. Because I find quite a lot of the bus compressors, the high pass filters, you crank them up and you start not compressing the kick of the mix drum, the kick drum comes through. With the snare still sometimes getting pretty pancaked.
Yeah.
And it sort of disjoints the low end of the mix sometimes. So by using a really soft filter, it just tilts the whole balance, so you have a much wider sweet spot to relax the low end of the mix.
Oh, cool.
So we added that to a switch. And that's mostly it. We've added a headphone amplifier for referencing mixes, so it's more useful for modern translation to iPods and stuff. And some other updates, remote controllable foot switch talkback now, so you could use it for, it's better in classrooms where we sell a lot. And also in production studios where you want credenza for a producer to stomp on. Do it again. As a wrap up, I'd say it's 12 channels to 72 channels. The DLC module is an option. We have producer's desk options, which now we're offering double PD in the middle of the console, so you can put things like an Avid S3 or a Slate Raven in the middle. We've gone for a new Visa arm, so you can have a screen in the middle of the DLC or on a PD, which can be dropped lower and out of the Phantom Center, so it's acoustically a bit nicer. New look, some new knobs, a new monitor pot, just for slightly better matching, and all that upgraded mix bus tonality. That's pretty much it. And it also has 24, 36 and 48 patch bays. On board if you want them.
And so how much is this going to start from? And
it's pretty much the same price as the old console. And I'm not the best guy for prices, but it generally starts around £17,000 and up. Depending on the configuration. You can start with a 12 channel. You can actually, if you bought PD buckets, you could add, and we can make it so you can add extra 12 channel buckets as you grow. Although it's best to start with like a fixed frame size. It generally is between about 17 and about 40, 50,000 pounds, depending on how big you go.
Sure. And when's this going to be available?
It's available in the summertime. We're just finalising the last few tweaks on it now, but we've got quite a few sold already, so we need to get it done.
Great. Okay, well, thanks very much, Tom.
No worries, thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Cheers, man. Thank you.